I grew up with a single dad who believed in the whole men don't cry thing. I learned to keep my feelings bottled up pretty early. By my teens, I was basically this emotionless robot, just following orders and respecting authority without question. High school was rough. I dealt with some serious bullying, and neither the teachers nor my dad were much help. It all came to a head when I finally snapped and fought back. That incident changed me. I realized that sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, even if it means getting your hands dirty. Fast forward a few years, and I'm living in my first apartment. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine, and I'm proud of it. I work hard at my job as a mechanic, often pulling long hours to make ends meet. My neighbor, let's call her Karen because that's exactly who she is a whole different story. Karen's this middle-aged woman who doesn't work and spends most of her time complaining about everything and everyone. From the moment I moved in, she's been a thorn in my side. At first, I tried to be polite and avoid conflict, but man, she made it hard. Our apartment complex has assigned parking spots, and mine happens to be right next to hers. One day, I came home from a grueling 12-hour shift to find her car parked in my spot. I knocked on her door, trying to keep my cool. When she answered, I politely pointed out that she had parked in my spot by mistake. Karen's response was far from friendly. She rudely told me she was busy with friends and suggested I park somewhere else for the night. When I reminded her that I paid for the spot as part of my rent, she claimed that her longer tenancy gave her more say in how things worked around the complex. She then dismissed me, telling me to use the street parking instead. I was too tired to argue, so I just parked on the street that night. But it didn't end there. Over the next few weeks, I'd come home to find her car in my spot more often than not. Each time I confronted her, she'd have some excuse or another. One night, after a certain stressful day at work, I came home to find her car in my spot again. I'd had enough. I walked up to her door and pounded on it. When Karen answered, she immediately demanded to know what my problem was. I explained, frustration evident in my voice, that her constant use of my parking spot was the issue. I requested that she move her car right away. Karen's response was cruel. She mocked me, suggesting I might cry to my mother, then added a snide remark about my lack of a mother. It was a low blow, and it was clear she'd been gossiping with other neighbors about my background. I tried one last time to resolve the situation peacefully, telling her I didn't want trouble and asking her again to move her car. Karen's response was a curt, "Make me," before she slammed the door in my face. I stood there fuming. And then I remembered something my dad taught me. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. I went back to my apartment and grabbed a pen and paper. I wrote a note saying, "This vehicle is parked illegally and will be towed at owner's expense," and stuck it on her windshield. Then I called a towing company. About 30 minutes later, I heard a commotion outside. Karen was yelling at the tow truck driver as he hooked up her car. She insisted that she lived there and couldn't be towed. The driver calmly explained that he was just doing his job and suggested she take up any issues with management. Karen then started shouting about how this must be the doing of her new neighbor, me, and threatened to have me evicted. I watched from my window as her car was towed away. Part of me felt bad, but a bigger part felt relieved. Maybe now she'd learned her lesson. The next morning there was a loud banging on my door. It was Karen, and she was livid. She called me names and threatened to sue me for harassment, complaining about the cost of retrieving her car. I apologized for her having to pay, but reminded her that I had warned her multiple times about parking in my spot. Karen then declared she was going to the management office and promised I'd be evicted by the end of the week. She took off, and I have to admit, I was a bit worried. But I decided to beat her to the punch. I went straight to the management office and explained the whole situation. I showed them pictures I'd taken of her car in my spot on different days, and texts I'd sent her asking her to move. The manager listened carefully and then thanked me for bringing this to their attention. They admitted they'd had other complaints about Karen, but no one had provided evidence before. The manager assured me they would handle the situation from there. A week later, I saw Karen moving out. Turns out she'd been violating several clauses in her lease, and management had been looking for a reason to evict her. My complaint was the final straw. When she was loading the last of her boxes, she saw me and started yelling. She accused me of being a snitch and ruining her life. I responded calmly, expressing regret that it had come to this, but reminding her that she had brought it on herself. I wished her well, hoping she'd learn from this and treat her future neighbors with more respect. She drove off, flipping me the bird as she went. The parking lot's been peaceful ever since. Sometimes standing up for yourself means more than throwing punches. It means being smart, documenting everything, and knowing when to ask for help. I learned that lesson the hard way, but I'm glad I did. No more Mr. Nice Guy, at least not when it comes to entitled neighbors. After graduating with a degree in English literature, I was eager to put my writing skills to good use. I spent months sending out applications, hoping to land a position that would allow me to flex my creative muscles. When I finally got an offer from a catalog company looking for a copywriter, I jumped at the opportunity. I was hired as a copywriter, tasked with creating engaging product descriptions for the company's catalog. The work was challenging but rewarding, and I felt like I was finally putting my degree to good use. However, things took an unexpected turn just a few weeks into my new role. The company's database administrator unexpectedly quit, leaving them in a lurch. Being the newest member of the team and having shown some aptitude with computers, I was asked to temporarily help out with the database until they could find a replacement. My manager assured me it would only be for a few weeks and promised I'd be compensated for the extra work. Eager to prove myself and naively trusting my superiors, I agreed. Those few weeks turned into months, and before I knew it, I was juggling 2 full-time jobs for the price of one. My days became a blur of writing copy and managing databases, often stretching well into the night. The company's culture was suffocating. Overtime wasn't just expected, it was demanded. Taking time off for doctor's appointments was treated like a personal affront, even when I had been working 60-hour weeks without additional pay. The office atmosphere was tense, with casual conversations frowned upon as if they were acts of treason. After 2 years of this grueling schedule, I finally reached my breaking point. It happened during a certain heated argument with my manager over a trivial matter. My manager insisted I stay late to finish a database update, even though I had already worked 12 hours that day. When I suggested postponing it until the next day, my manager accused me of lacking commitment. I defended myself, pointing out that I had been doing 2 jobs for 2 years without complaint. My manager then reminded me that they had given me an opportunity when no one else would, implying I should be grateful. That conversation was the last straw. From that day forward, I decided to stop being a doormat. I refused to do any overtime unless it was paid, which led to a sudden spike in the company's overtime expenses. Faced with mounting costs, they finally decided to split my role into 2 separate positions. My manager told me of their decision to separate my responsibilities and asked which role I would prefer. I chose the database side. They offered to increase my salary by £1,000 per year, which I felt was low for a full-time database admin role. When I tried to negotiate, my manager reminded me of recent layoffs and told me to be thankful for getting a raise at all. They did, however, agree to a pay review in 6 months. I reluctantly agreed, but when the 6-month mark rolled around, my requests for the promised review were met with evasion and excuses. After 2 more months of chasing, I finally got an answer. My manager told me to stop being greedy and be grateful for the raise I had already received. That was the final nail in the coffin. I immediately started job hunting and soon landed a better position elsewhere. When I handed in my notice, my boss acted surprised and asked if there was anything they could do to keep me. I told them there wasn't. They made me work my full 3-month notice period, but I had one last card to play. I'd learned they were trying to hire the project manager from our software supplier to replace me. During his next on-site visit, I cornered him at lunch. I casually mentioned that I had heard they wanted to hire him to replace me. When he hesitated to discuss it, I advised him not to accept less than $30,000, explaining that while it was more than I was earning, the job demanded it. I warned him about the hard work, lack of future raises, and longer commute, encouraging him to hold out for the higher salary. 6 months later, long after I'd left, he started at the company. I like to think he took my advice, but the story doesn't end there. 4 years after leaving, I received an email from a recruiter about a job opening. It turned out to be my old position at the catalog company. The job description was identical to the one I'd written years ago, with only the reporting line changed. The salary was now $40,000. Part of me was tempted to apply just to see the looks on their faces when I walked in for the interview. But I knew better than to step back into that toxic environment, no matter how much they were willing to pay now. Instead, I did something better. I reached out to some of my old colleagues who were still stuck in that miserable place. I told them about the job posting and the new salary. Within months, half of the department had either leveraged the information for substantial raises or found better jobs elsewhere. The last I heard, the company was struggling to retain talent, and my old boss had been demoted due to his department's high turnover rate. It may have taken years, but karma finally caught up with them. I'm now working at a company that values its employees, doing work I love, and earning what I'm worth. When I was 16, desperately looking for my first job to save up for a car, Supermart was the only place willing to hire a scrawny, awkward teenager with zero experience. At first, I hated every minute of it. The early morning shifts, the cranky customers, the mind-numbing task of restocking shelves. It all seemed like torture. But as time went on, I found myself actually enjoying the routine. My co-workers became like a second family, and I took pride in knowing every nook and cranny of the store. Sure, I tried other things. I went to community college for a while thinking I'd become an accountant or something. but numbers bored me to tears, and I found myself longing for the familiar aisles of Supermart. So I dropped it out and threw myself into my work. Over the years, I moved up from bagger to cashier to my current position in the stock and dairy department. My baby face meant customers often mistake me for a newbie, which can be both amusing and annoying. Recently, Supermart started offering personalized work shirts to all employees, not just managers. I was thrilled to get mine. No more fiddling with those annoying name tags. Little did I know this simple shirt would lead to one of the most bizarre encounters of my career. It was a typical Sunday afternoon, the store buzzing with weekend shoppers. I was restocking the egg section, carefully arranging cartons, when I noticed a woman and her teenage son approaching. The woman had that look, you know the one, where you can tell she's about to make your day more difficult. The woman asked me about the starting pay rate, mentioning she wanted to know if it would be a good place for her son's first job. I apologized and told her I wasn't sure. Her face immediately scrunched up like I'd just insulted her entire family tree. She then questioned why I didn't know, assuming I was a department manager. I explained that I was just a part-timer. She pointed out my personalized shirt, insisting only managers got shirts like that. I looked down at my new shirt, suddenly wishing I'd stuck with the old name tag. I clarified that the store had recently started offering these shirts to all employees, from managers to beggars. She lit at a huff that could have knocked over the egg display if I hadn't just restocked it. The woman wouldn't believe that part-timers were allowed to wear personalized shirts, and then asked about my hourly wage. I tried to keep my voice level, even though I was starting to get irritated. I explained that if her son was hired, he would make much less than I did, given my long tenure and recent raise. I suggested she would be better off asking a manager about the current starting pay. Her eyes narrowed and I could practically see the gears turning in her head. She doubted my claim of working there for 16 years, saying I looked no older than 20. She then demanded to know what I made when I started, assuming it wouldn't be far off from the current starting rate. I looked her dead in the eye, realizing this was my chance to end this conversation once and for all. I told her my starting wage, $7.25. Her jaw dropped so fast I thought it might hit the floor. She got angry and said something incomprehensible. Without another word, she grabbed her son's arm and stormed off, leaving me alone with my beloved eggs. The next day, I was surprised to see the woman return, this time without her son. She walked straight up to me. The woman apologized, admitting she had spoken with the store manager who confirmed everything I had said. She expressed regret for doubting me and for her behavior the previous day. I was taken aback by her sudden change in attitude. I thanked her, noting that it wasn't often people came back to apologize. She explained that she realized she had set a terrible example for her son, who refused to come with her that day out of embarrassment. She admitted to being frustrated with the job market and taking it out on me. I expressed understanding, acknowledging that finding a good job can be tough, especially for teenagers. The woman agreed and then surprised me by asking if I could give her son some advice on applying to Supermart. She mentioned that despite the previous day's incident, it seemed like a good place to work. I agreed to help, telling her to have her son come by when I was working, and I'd walk him through the application process. The woman thanked me, expressing gratitude for my kindness, especially after how she had treated me. I don't know, maybe my personalized shirt wasn't such a bad idea after all. I've always been a hard worker, putting in long hours at my accounting job to make ends meet. My sister, on the other hand, well, let's just say she's never been big on the whole work ethic thing. She's always looking for the easy way out, convinced that the universe owes her something. We were close when we were kids, but as adults, we drifted apart. She got into all sorts of new age stuff, constantly talking about manifesting wealth and cosmic energy. I'd roll my eyes but keep my mouth shut to avoid arguments. One day, on a whim, I bought a lottery ticket. I never usually gamble, but something just felt right. When the numbers were drawn, I'd won. Not just a few bucks, but a jackpot. $215 million. At first I was in shock. Then came the excitement, followed by the overwhelming sense of responsibility. I knew this money could change my life, but I wanted to be smart about it. I kept it quiet at first, only telling my parents. But somehow my sister found out. That's when the madness began. She showed up at my door, all smiles and hugs. She said we had won. I was confused by her use of we, and asked her what she meant. She explained that she had been praying for our financial success for months, and claimed her positive energy made it happen. I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. She then asked when she would get her half. I was taken aback and asked her to clarify. She insisted that her spiritual contribution was crucial and that she had manifested this for us. I tried to gently explain that while I appreciated her prayers, this was my win as I had bought the ticket. Her face changed instantly. The smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure entitlement. She called me an ungrateful brat, saying I owed her after everything she had done for me. I shut the door in her face. A week later, I got served with court papers. My own sister was suing me for spiritual compensation. The lawsuit claimed her intense prayer and energy work directly led to my lottery win, and therefore she was entitled to half the jackpot. I thought it was a joke. The judge didn't throw it out immediately, which shocked me. Apparently, there was some obscure precedent about spiritual services that made it complicated. As the court date approached, things got weirder. My sister started showing up at every public event I attended. She'd stand outside with a sign, "Cosmic Justice for Spiritual Labor." One time, at a charity gala I was hosting, she managed to get on stage and grab the microphone. She warned the audience that the millions were cursed unless the universe was paid its due. She declared herself the conduit of cosmic balance and demanded recognition. Security dragged her out, but not before she threw a handful of crystals at me, yelling about cleansing my tainted aura. Then came the protests. Every morning I'd wake up to find her camped outside my house with a group of her New Age friends. They'd chant and wave incense, demanding karmic restitution. They would chant, asking for cosmic justice and demanding it immediately. It was driving me nuts. I couldn't leave my house without being accosted by crystal-wielding lunatics. The media was having a field day with its all. The day of the trial finally arrived. I was nervous, but my lawyer assured me we had a strong case. When we entered the courtroom, my sister dramatically gasped and clutched her chest. She claimed to sense negative energies and insisted the room must be cleansed before they could proceed. The judge told her to take her seat or she be held in contempt. My sister's lawyer tried to argue that her spiritual services were a form of work that directly resulted in my win. They even brought in a self-proclaimed psychic expert to testify about the monetary value of cosmic influence. The expert claimed that the vibrational frequency of focused prayer could be quantified. He said his calculations showed the plaintiff's spiritual output was worth exactly 49.7% of the lottery winnings. My lawyer countered by pointing out the absurdity of the claim and the lack of any tangible evidence. He also revealed that my sister had a history of filing frivolous lawsuits against family members and former friends. As the trial went on, my sister got more and more agitated. She kept interrupting with outbursts about astral projections and karmic debts. The judge's patience was wearing thin. Finally, it was time for the verdict. The judge looked exasperated as he delivered his decision. He said in the case of spiritual compensation for lottery winnings, he found in favor of the defendant. He explained that the court could not entertain claims based on unquantifiable mystical practices and dismissed the case. I breathed a sigh of relief, but my sister wasn't done. She stood up, pointing at the judge. She dramatically proclaimed that he had doomed us all, that the cosmic scales were unbalanced, and that chaos would reign. However, the saga wasn't quite over. A week later, I received a letter from my sister. It was a bill for spiritual services rendered, totaling exactly half my lottery winnings. At the bottom, she'd written a threat, saying I should pay up or face the wrath of the universe. I chuckled, tore up the letter, and tossed it in the recycling bin. Then I sat down and wrote a check. Not to my sister, but to a local mental health charity. I figured if anything good could come from this mess, it might as well be helping people who actually need it. Last I heard, my sister has started a GoFundMe to restore cosmic balance and save the world from karmic catastrophe. Apparently, she's raised $37 so far. I guess the universe works in mysterious ways after all.